There we go.
Right on. Okay. Matt, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for joining us on this, the inaugural, the first ever locally optimistic analytics, ask me anything style interview. Um, I'm so stoked that you're here. I'm so stoked you're able to make it. I just want to open with a giant thank you to you, a huge thank you to Scott and the rest of the locally optimistic team. I am really excited to do this. I'm really excited to talk to you. I feel like there is so much value to be unlocked in this format, in this community. And I think this is just the first step toward a literal treasure chest. uh, so
Thanks. I'm about to live up to those expectations. And yeah, I want to say thank you to the locally optimistic community. I think it's a fantastic community. And thank you for organizing this.
For sure. No, so let me just start with the way that we know one another. So Matt and I met, I think, quite early in both of our times at Automatic, which is the sort of umbrella company behind WordPress.com. And we met when the whole company could still fit in one big room. And I remember I sat down and you introduced yourself as Matt Mazur, like laser. And I just knew that this was the beginning of something great.
I've stopped introducing myself that way because people inevitably wind up calling me Mazur the laser. So I've learned not to go that route.
Well, sorry to have totally.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it back.
So talk to me about like your path to Automatic, because at that time you primarily identified as a software engineer, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So just a little bit of background on me. I joined Automatic about a year after I left the Air Force. I was an officer in the Air Force, and I kind of knew early on in my career as an officer that I didn't want to make it a career. Like I didn't want to do 20 years and wind up doing that my whole life. Mm-hmm. And so I started learning web development and building a bunch of products on the side because I had built a bunch of stuff in the past, products, and I kind of got this like startup itch, and I wanted to eventually do a startup and build a product. So I built a bunch of products on the side. One of them was called Lean Domain Search. It's a domain name generator. So if you're looking to name your company or name a website, this was a tool that could help you name that. So I eventually left the Air Force and I worked on this Lean Domain Search tool for a while. Rewinding a little bit, I had another domain search tool years before called Domain Pigeon. And Matt Mullenweg, the founder of Automatic and who it's named after, had seen this Domain Pigeon tool on Hacker News when it launched. And it just so happened that they needed somebody to work on domains on WordPress.com. And so this stood out as like a tool that they could benefit from. So he reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want to come work at Automatic on domains? At the time, though, I was a lieutenant in the Air Force and I still had a few years left to serve. So that didn't really go anywhere. But fast forward to the time after I left the Air Force and I had this domain search tool. And I kind of realized that it was doing okay, but I didn't really want to do it full time anymore. So I found Matt's original response to me from like 4 years earlier, and I responded to it and I said, hey, remember me? I had this domain search tool back in the day. I've got this new one now. Is there still an opportunity to come work at Automatic? So Matt said, yeah, there is. And I wound up going through the hiring process, and they wound up doing a small acqui-hire of my domain search tool. And that's how I came to be a software developer at Automatic.
So when you think back on Lean Domain Search and kind of the guts of that tool, do you feel like you had some seeds of sort of what you've become even at that point?
I do, yeah. So I also had another tool called Precedent, and it's still a tool that I run today. It's kind of a web-based timeline maker and road mapping tool. And with Lean Domain Search and Precedent, some other things that I built, as an engineer, I love like being heads down in the code and building the products. But what I wasn't as good at is growing the products. And over time, I came to realize that I was weak in marketing and I was weak in data. And like just rewinding to like some of the early days of Lean Domain Search and Precedent, like I didn't really know what the metrics were. I could tell you some basic stuff from like Google Analytics, some basic usage data, but I didn't have any sort of BI dashboard, and I only had a really rudimentary sense of what the core metrics were, what the conversion rates were, what retention was, who my best customers were, and things like that. And so it was kind of my desire to grow these products that I built that got me down the path of learning about data. Because as I think a lot of people here will agree, like being able to use data to grow a business and make it better is a superpower. And
for sure.
That's what got me into it in the first place.
Because you pivoted from this engineering role at Automatic into were you the first sort of data and analytics role in the marketing department at Automatic?
Yeah, so when I joined Automatic, I was on, it was called the store team at the time. And it was this team at Automatic that was focused on monetizing WordPress.com. And I joined and I worked on domain names for about a year and a half, basically making the process of registering domain names better and fixing bugs around it and things like that. After that, I wound up switching to the data team, and they had been working on this internal big data analytics platform that they called Nosara. We needed some tools to make accessing Nosara easier. So for those of you that have used Mixpanel or Amplitude, we needed basically a front-end tools like Mixpanel and like Amplitude to analyze all this data that we were collecting on WordPress.com users. And so I transitioned from the store team to the data team to help build the tools to analyze our users. So we wound up building, for example, funnel tools, conversion rate, that shows us conversion rate trends, and a bunch of other tools around analyzing this data that we began tracking on our users. And from there, I wound up switching over to the marketing team, where we focused specifically on using this data to help us understand the people coming to WordPress.com and building and improving the tools that we had already built in the past.
That's when we first worked together directly.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Those were the summer of our careers, I guess. Hopefully not, actually. And so briefly, I think probably not related to sort of us working together directly for the first time, you then departed Automatic to work in a formal, official data science role at Help Scout. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, so I left the Air Force, went to Automatic, and I kind of knew long-term I wanted to work on my own products, my own software business. And I wanted more experience than just working at Automatic. And so there was an opportunity to join Help Scout as a data scientist, data analyst role. And I wound up taking the leap and making that transition.
So can you talk, this is a little far afield, but can you talk a little bit about, like, what are these job titles right now? Like in 2019, like, what is the difference between like a software engineer and a data analyst and a data scientist? And there's this new job title that I'm pretty excited about, like this idea of like the analyst engineer. Like, do you think this is a function of the work being unclear? Do you think this is a function of like it just being a very like sort of new function? Like, what's this about?
Yeah, I do think it is largely a result of it being a pretty new field. And so, for example, I joined Help Scout in a data science lead role, but I honestly don't consider myself a data scientist. Like, to me, somebody who's doing data science is doing a lot of statistical modeling and machine learning, and that's not a lot of what I do. I don't have a lot of expertise there, and I don't wind up using that skill set in my day-to-day basis. But what I am doing is SQL and working in Looker and working in BI tools and helping the business understand how it's doing and how to improve how it's operating. And to me, there is some overlap and it's nebulous, and I think people can disagree on what exactly a data scientist is. But if I were to introduce myself, I would probably call myself a data analyst. And to your point, there are other terms now, analytical engineer and things like that. And it'll be interesting to see where all these titles land in the coming years.
Yeah. So you mentioned moving from Automatic and sort of literally building data analysis tools and you mentioned the tools that you started to use at Help Scout. What was that experience like? What's the transition like going from literally making your own like mini Google Analytics to working with these third-party platforms? Like there have got to be pros and cons there, right?
Yeah, I'd say like at both Automatic and at Help Scout, in the early days, a lot of things were tracked via spreadsheets. It's a manual, time-intensive process to track our metrics. Usually, you'll see something like metrics, metric names along like a left column, like how many signups, how many visitors, how many purchases, and things like that, and like dates along the columns. And somebody would be responsible for manually updating these spreadsheets every week. And that was the case for a while at Automatic back in the day, and also the case at Help Scout. When I joined Help Scout, that was very much the state of things. We had something called the growth dashboard, and this dashboard was a giant spreadsheet that somebody would spend 3 hours every Monday running queries and pulling from different data sources to fill out. And so I took that over, and that was my role for a little while. And we all quickly realized that this was not a good long-term solution. So we started investigating different BI tools. And I'll say too that Automatic, we kind of built our own BI tools at Automatic. We didn't wind up using Looker at the time or any of the other BI tools on the market. That has since changed, but at the time we didn't. Help Scout, meanwhile, we knew we didn't want to build our own tool. So we started researching BI tools and quickly settled on and wound up adopting Looker. And I've worked in Looker probably almost every day for the last 2 years or so, and I love it. I feel like such a powerful tool, and I think a lot of people here will have worked with it and will understand that when I say it.
Yeah. Is that a hard pitch to sort of non-technical stakeholders to move away from their spreadsheets? I feel like that's something people sometimes can hold really precious.
No, it wasn't too much because fortunately at Help Scout, the leadership understood how limited these spreadsheets were. And while they served their purpose early on in the business of Help Scout, they realized that it's very hard to benefit a ton from it. Like it's really like minimum viable product. Like just knowing manually going into Google Analytics and pulling how many visitors you had and throwing that in a spreadsheet and having to update that every week. You're very limited in terms of the kind of analysis that you can do and the kind of insights and how much you could benefit the business.
Right.
And thankfully, the management and the leadership at Help Scout realized that, and so they put in the resources in terms of hiring somebody, myself, and
that's you,
giving us money and time to research tools and adopt one.
And now what are you doing? You're not at Help Scout?
Yeah. So while I was at Automatic and later Help Scout, I had this Precedent, this timeline maker tool on the side, and little by little, it grew during my time at these companies. 2018 was a pretty good year, so I decided to take the plunge and focus on it more because it was very hard, like juggling this and in addition to a full-time job. But opportunity presented itself to continue working with Help Scout in the same capacity that I was when I was full-time, and also to come back to Automatic and do a little contract work there. And so these days I spend probably about 2/3 of my week doing client work with Automatic, Help Scout, and also working on my timeline maker business on the side.
So there's a couple of conversations that I really want to hear more about involved in this transition. I really want to hear what your pitch was to your current employer at Help Scout that you didn't want to work for them anymore, but you wanted them to hire you back as a consultant. And I would also really like to hear more about the conversation with your wife about leaving your job to sort of engage in this sort of freelance, product, client-driven sort of tentacled gig.
You might not expect it, but Help Scout was amazingly supportive. Like I stressed out about it beforehand. Like I worried there would be this negative reaction from the leadership, but it was the opposite of that, really. Like, I mean, granted, they weren't like thrilled that I was leaving, but they were happy for me that I was going to pursue my own business full time. And when they did their farewell post, and the CEO Nick Francis even said, like, Matt is leaving in the best way possible to be an entrepreneur and to focus on his own business, but he'll still be consulting with us on the side. And as far as the conversation with my wife went, she's been incredibly supportive of me working on these side businesses over the years, and she knew that I wanted to put more time into it. So when the timing was right, she was supportive of it, and
Yeah.
I'm incredibly grateful that she was.
So can you talk a little bit about, so I don't even know if this was an intentional choice or not, but I feel like for a lot of folks who work in the field where we work, this analysis piece, this sort of like working in software space, what you think of as like the upward position, right? Your sort of professional trajectory. Often folks say like, oh, well, it's management, right? It's sort of learning to do strategy, learning to sort of work with people and build teams. And it seems like you've sort of taken a different route, which is sort of leveraging the individual contributor role to like this much bigger extent. Like, did you have to balance that? Like, was that a conscious choice on your part?
Yeah, I will say, like, when I'm towards the end of my time as a full-time employee at Automatic, I was trying to balance team lead responsibilities with being an individual contributor. So attending lots of meetings, doing one-on-ones, but also trying to spend time analyzing data and helping the company grow through the use of data. And it was very exhausting, context switching between this management capacity and as an individual contributor. And I kind of learned that my strength and what I enjoy doing is being heads down in the SQL, in the code, and using those skills to help grow the business. What I didn't enjoy doing was attending a lot of meetings and being in a management role. And so for now anyway, I don't aspire to be like any director of analytics or a team lead to a lot of people. Like I feel like I'm most valuable when I can be an individual contributor and I have given time to do heads down focused work and grow my technical skills. So and I don't think I would have always thought it that way. I would have probably told you a few years back that like the career path was to become a team lead and to move up the chain, so to speak. But I don't think it's for everybody. And I think before you take a lead role, make sure that you understand why you're doing it and whether you're going to be okay moving away from the heads down technical work to attending meetings and thinking about these bigger picture executive and management type decisions. For me, that wasn't a good fit, but for a lot of people, it will be.
That's really helpful. Wow. When you think back on your own career and you think about the work that you've done and the things that you've done outside of work, like not even necessarily on the computer or writing code, like what are some of the things that you've done that you think really contributed to your success?
I didn't want to do the Air Force as a career. I'm really glad I got to do it. It kind of helped me transition from this like young kid to like learning about professionalism and like learning how to attend meetings, as like weird as that sounds, and like participating in meetings and how to show up on time and just kind of like just be professional in how you act. And I don't know, that maybe that doesn't sound like much, but it kind of like ingrained some of those habits in me, which I think have played dividends in my life outside of the Air Force. Yeah.
One of the things you've mentioned to me a number of times and you've encouraged me to engage in is this idea of like a mastermind group or some kind of a community of practice. Could you speak to that a little bit? Like, what is that? Why is it important?
Sure. So I'm a member of a mastermind group. There's basically a small group of like-minded people. In this case, they're other software entrepreneurs who have their own businesses. and they're all in similar stage as I am, where they're trying to grow their business, and they're trying to market them and just in general grow them and level up as entrepreneurs. And as like a solo founder who's kind of built these products on my own, I did spend a long time without a mastermind group, where I was basically just trying to figure things out by myself. And while you certainly can do that, you're probably gonna waste a lot of time. You're gonna run into issues that other people have run into.
Mm-hmm.
You're not gonna have like a clear, like fresh perspective on the problems that you're facing, because you're so heads down in it day to day. So joining a mastermind group was a really transformational thing for me as an entrepreneur. And I credit a lot of the growth I've had in my business the last few years to having a mastermind group that I can bounce ideas off of, who I can contribute to helping their businesses grow, and vice versa. And it doesn't just have to be for software entrepreneurs either. Simon,
Mm-hmm.
I know you're part of a new mastermind group for tech leaders in your area, and I'd encourage anybody else who finds themselves like alone to find like-minded individuals where you can maybe meet online on Zoom, for example, once a week, and just kind of chat through the issues that you're facing. You'll probably find that you were able to grow and improve a lot faster when you have a group like that.
Yeah, I find it to be really valuable as well. And you know, I was thinking, I wanted to ask you, like, if you had the opportunity to like build your own thing and create your own reporting structure, like what would that stack look like? And then I realized you have had that opportunity. That's exactly what you have with Precedent, right? So what does that look like? Well, like, what is your current reporting stack for your own product?
Well, it's if I had the financial resources to do so, I would use Looker with Precedent. But for those of you that have know what Looker costs, you know that it's not cheap. So I use Mode, and I use Stitch. Stitch is a tool that lets you get data from your different data sources into your data warehouse, and I use a Postgres data warehouse. Mm-hmm. And for Precedent, that works fine, and it's free. So I don't have any complaints there. If I had the money to do so, I would probably level up that stack. I would use Looker. BigQuery doesn't cost much. I could use BigQuery now, for example, but yeah, I would definitely use Looker if I could. Mm-hmm. At HelpScout, for example, we use Looker and we use Fivetran, and it has served us very well. It's very easy to get going, and I don't have any complaints about that stack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in thinking about your journey here, right, through Automatic and through HelpScout, and now doing your own thing, this sort of like bootstrap, consultancy. Like, what kinds of things have you observed to be like common problems when it comes to organizations and reporting, or organizations and analysis, or even like that kind of data stack, or honestly, even like just internal team structures? Because it seems like, you know, there's a little bit of a Trotsky situation, not Trotsky. Who am I thinking of, right? Like every analytics family, every happy analytics family is the same, but every unhappy analytics family is unhappy in their own way, right? It's not Trotsky. Tolstoy. Tolstoy.
Yeah, there you go. It's a great question, and probably something that we could talk at length about. One thing that I've been thinking about lately is both at HelpScout and at Automatic, and even work on my own side projects. I always feel constrained by time. Like there's always more data to be wrangled than you have time to do well. And I think it's easy to fall into this default where you're basically just responding to data requests. As you know, somebody comes to you with a requirement, and you build out a dashboard, you do some modeling, you build out a dashboard, and you call it complete, and you move on to the next thing. Take like a simple example. At Automatic recently, we were modeling cost per acquisition, which is a marketing metric. And so there was a request like, hey, can we model out cost per acquisition and make it possible to report on that in our our Looker dashboards. So we said, okay, and did the necessary modeling, set up some reports, marked it done, moved on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
What in a perfect world, and again, this is going to be hard to do organizationally, but like, what if instead of just reporting on CPA, which is useful, don't get me wrong, but like, what if you took the time to work with the marketing team to help them understand how to drive down CPA, like because that's in the end, what matters to the business is not that you have a dashboard reflecting your cost per acquisition. What matters, the reason they want that is so that they can optimize the cost per acquisition. And don't get me wrong, setting up that basic reporting is an important step to get visibility onto it. But I feel like it's only part of the solution in an ideal world. Like I would love to work with that marketing team and help them go above and beyond what their request was, and use any insights that I have and any like data capabilities that I have to help them slice and dice that and help them brainstorm ways that we can move the needle on that metric to help improve the business. I think it's very easy to like, I don't know, I think a lot about like having an impact as a data analyst, and like setting up reporting is great, but in the end, at least in the context of working at a SaaS company or a business, I think your work needs to have an impact. And if nobody acts on the work that you're doing, like if let's say I set up the CPA dashboard and nobody acts on it, nobody does anything to improve the business, like, does it really matter? And I think you could argue about that, but like, I know, I think about that a lot. Like, how can I have the most impact on the business as a data analyst? And often that's not going to be just going data request after data request and working through those. Like, I think giving yourself space to like do these deep explorations of the data and gain and working with these teams at your company to use your data skills and work with them to have an impact on the business. I think that's where you can have an impact.
At this year's MADS conference out in San Francisco, this experience that you're describing of this just endless circle of data requests and reporting creation was dubbed the cycle of boredom.
Yeah.
How do you get out of it? I mean, I feel like probably everyone on this call either currently is in or has been in this cycle of boredom. So like, how do you get out of it? I guess you go work at Help Scout. Like, what do you do?
Well, I mean, I don't want to say this is an issue at Help Scout, but this comes up too at Help Scout. There's more data requests than we have time to do.
It feels like that's the case everywhere, right?
Yeah,
like,
probably is. Mm-hmm. And like, you answer one question and 3 questions pop up as a result. And you answer one of those and 3 questions pop up as a result. So I think it's incredibly important to be able to prioritize. And that's going to be a combination of using your own judgment and also getting help from your manager. Hopefully you have a manager who you can talk to about this and talk about prioritization. Mm-hmm. I don't think it should just be working through an unprioritized queue of data requests all day. Yeah. That is not a way to prioritize. When I think about prioritization, I think you have to factor in what the potential impact on whatever your organization's key objective is. So if you're a business and you're thinking about, and you want to grow the business, like, is your work either directly or indirectly going to have an impact on growing the business? Right. And you can't always work on stuff like that, but like it's a useful compass for the type of things that you work on. Also, like, not always, but if you're working with people in your organization kind of higher up, like your CEO or your CFO, CMO, you can usually have a big impact there, because there's usually like no part of an organization that can't benefit from some savvy data analysis. And the higher up in the organization you go, where you're using those skills, the more impact the more impact you can have on the organization. I also think you have to take into account like how long something's going to take. Like sometimes there might be a request that'll take 20 minutes, and maybe it's low impact, but it's 20 minutes, so you can just knock it out. But sometimes you'll also want to invest in these like multi-week efforts to do some like really fundamental reporting. We're working on this a little bit at Automatic right now, like getting some of our core reporting set up, and it's there, but there's room for improvement, and we're currently focused on that. And it's not a small undertaking either, but the leadership also recognizes that it's incredibly important, and so we're investing time into doing that right now. So I don't think there's a single simple answer for like how to prioritize the things that are coming into you, but yeah, I would think about like what can you work on that's going to impact organizations' key objectives.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about working with other folks within the organization, obviously there are people sort of higher in the ladder to work with, but there's also this sort of lateral work that occurs. And Spencer has submitted a question in the channel. Spencer, thank you so much. You're the first ever AMA question asker. We'll get you a beanie. So he says, Matt, thanks for your time to do this. I also want to thank you again, Matt. Super stoked you're here. And he asks, do you ever work with pure data engineers? And if so, how'd that go? Like as the analyst part of that relationship? And do you have any advice or like any observations about like how it can work well, how it can't work well? He asks about patterns and anti-patterns. Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. At Help Scout now, at Automatic, we do have data engineers who are focused solely on data engineering. At Automatic, at least, they've been an incredible resource. Like we would not have reporting capabilities that we have right now without a lot of hard work from our data engineers to make that data accessible to us for analyses. As far as patterns and anti-patterns go, I don't know. I would say make sure to involve them in the process. Make sure that they understand the context for your work. So like we wind up having to work with our data engineers quite a bit. And I think it's one thing to just say like we need A, B, C, but it's another thing to say like, okay, so for some background, we're working on this project. We expect it to have this impact. These are our requirements. This is kind of the time frame that we're looking for it in. Like to basically just be respectful of their time and the other priorities that they have going on, and then hopefully have a productive collaboration with them. Simon, I know you've worked quite a bit with our data engineers too. Anything you'd add?
I love them unconditionally. In hearing you say that, it's really interesting because the way that you're describing the way that you prefer to interact with data engineers is the other side of the way that you've identified that you prefer data requests arrive for you. That is, rather than sort of a bare request for a metric, you want to have a conversation and you want to talk about the bigger context. And it's just kind of interesting to sort of hear that on both sides of the relationship.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty good advice for working with anybody too.
Yeah, just some basic human interaction advice from Matt Mazur. That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, especially working remotely. Like I think communication is essential, and yeah, the more I think just being polite and respectful of people's time and recognizing that they have other conflicting priorities and you're not always going to be number one. And just being clear, I think it can go a really long way, remote or not remote.
Yeah. That's, well, you're always number one for me, Matt. I just want to let you know that. So when you think about people at the beginning of their career, I feel like a lot of folks right now want to know, like, how do you become a data analyst? How do you become somebody who like it works in this space? Because even though it is new and like the job titles are kind of ambiguous, like it's a really cool job. And I think it's the kind of job that a lot of people are really interested in right now. Like, how do you advise that? I can't be the first person to ever ask you, like, how do I get into this? How do I get better at this?
Like, I love like spreadsheets and I love working with numbers and like I love working with data. And a lot of people don't. Like, they hate spreadsheets, and like you tell somebody like, oh, you can just go solve this in a simple spreadsheet, and they'll like try to do anything to avoid it. And there's probably a lot of people in your organization that are similar, but who could nevertheless benefit from somebody who does who is comfortable doing those things, and who understands how to use numbers to make decisions. And so if I were starting out as like a junior analyst, I would find people in your organization who you can work with, who you can help use your skills to benefit from. And I would also say, like, I think, like, at Automatic, I got to work on the store team and the data team and the marketing team. And I think I'm, like, professionally, it was good that I got to do that, because I got to gain some experience with, like, e-commerce and with marketing, and later and with the data team, and to understand how they work and kind of understand the how these fit into the organization. So I think early on in your career as a data analyst, I would try to not just focus on one thing for many years. I think building up this like background for understanding how your organization works and the different data requirements and how they use data and how to work with the people on those different teams, I think it can be really valuable. And maybe later on in your career, you pick one of those fields and like double down on it and just build that expertise. But I think early on you can. I think it's good to explore and like just learn about the different parts of your business and the organization, and like I said, attach yourself to people in the organization that you can work with to use your data skills to empower. It like I was saying earlier, if you can find a way to like work with your CFO, for example, or work with your CMO, and just maybe it's not something you even do full time, but like you just volunteer some of your time to help work with them and sit in on their meetings and see how they use numbers and data, and see how you can help them automate some of it or understand it better. Like they will probably quickly latch onto you and try to help you do more. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say, is try to gain that breadth early on in your career, and look for people who you can work with and empower using your data skills.
That's great. I think that's really excellent advice, and I will take it. So for the folks who are here today, like if they want to find out more about you and sort of what your deal is, and like what's the best way for them to find out more about Matt Mazur?
I've got a blog, mattmazur.com. I don't update it nearly as often as I'd like to anymore, but I've written about a lot of my work at Automatic and Help Scout and Precedent on there over the years. I'm also on Twitter, MHMazur, and those are probably the best places you can find me. And on my blog, I've got a contact page if you want to reach out by email or whatever. Feel free to shoot me a note. I love chatting with people about this and learning about what other people are working on. And if I can help with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. That's great.
And I know you've spoken at Join in the past. Do you have any conferences on your calendar anytime in the near future?
No, none right now. Yeah, another advice for people just getting started, or even those of you who are more senior, like blogging is incredibly powerful. I'm biased because I help work on WordPress.com, which is probably the best blogging platform out there. But yeah, it's not a lot of people like writing, and if you are technical and you can communicate well, like it's a very powerful combination. And not only that, but like if you're ever looking for other work, for example, it's going to be easy for that. It's hard to look at somebody's resume and really know like how they think about things and how they communicate. And you can get a sense of that during an interview process. But if you have a blog that a potential employer can go to see like what you've worked on in the past and how you think about these problems and how you communicate, it's a huge advantage. And my brother-in-law, actually, he was a welder, and he transitioned into becoming a junior software engineer. And he started a blog at the beginning of this process and wrote about his experience, like not knowing the difference between front end and back end development to becoming quite good at PHP. And he shared that on his resume, and his employers wound up checking out his blog and checking out his portfolio. And they told him after he was hired that him having that was a big part of why he was hired. So I would encourage anybody else out there to write, it'll pay dividends for years and years to come. Yeah, that's my soapbox.
That's awesome. I think that's great advice. And WordPress.com is always a source of free blogs. Just tell them I sent you. Cool. And so this is it. We're wrapping up the first ever Locally Optimistic AMA. How'd it go for you, Matt?
Well, you're good. You're good at this.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's nice of you to say. For folks who are here who are listening, we've got another one tentatively scheduled. Announcing it here for the first time, July 29th. It's going to be Miss Claire Carroll, who I know is on this call as well, from Fishtown Analytics. Really excited to chat with Claire next. I think we've got a real lineup of analytics all-stars coming down the pipeline, and it's a really exciting time to be part of the Locally Optimistic community. So, Matt, thank you so much. Scott, everybody else, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your week, everybody.
Thanks all.